7 simple moon photography tips I wish I knew earlier. Hello PHOTOPILLER, Rafael the Bar here. In this video I want to share with you 7 tips that will help you rapidly transform your moon photography. I'm talking about going from taking photos like this one or this one, where the moon appears very small in the photo, to photos like this one or this other one, where the moon becomes one of the main subjects, where the moon appears big in the frame, allowing us to see its color and texture. So, long story short, if you want to take photos like these ones, the first thing you need to do is to apply tip number 1. Decide the photo you want. Go find a really cool subject and literally take a piece of paper and design the photo you want to take. Considering the size of your subject, decide how big you want the moon relative to the subject and how high you want the moon to be relative again to the height of your subject. And once you've decided the photo you want, once you've defined the photo you want to capture, apply tip number 2. Oh, just one thing, I almost forgot it. Before we go to tip number 2, if you experience a lack of inspiration or lack of ideas, you can always go to PhotoPills, go to the My Stuff menu and tap on Awards. And here you'll find amazing photos the PhotoPills community is sharing with all of us via the Submit button here. And here you'll find lots of inspiration on moon photography photos that have been imagined, planned and captured by the community. With the awards, it's super easy to get inspired. Check them out. Tip number 2. Plan your photos. The French poet Antoine de Saint-Exupéry said, "A goal without a plan is just a wish." And I agree with him 100%. You cannot expect to get out there and put your tripod in a place and see the moon rising or setting right where you want. You need to plan. And planning means to find the right shooting spot and the right shooting date and time. The moon will be right where you want it to be in the frame, so you can go and capture the photo. The workflow is actually super simple. It's like a game. You imagine a photo, you plan it, and then you go and capture it. Imagine, plan, shoot, we say. If you start planning your photos, you'll save a lot of time and frustration and you'll get better and better photos. So the question is, how do you plan your moonshots? Well, you can easily plan your moonshots with PhotoPills following the steps I'm sharing in this video. Watch it because it's a super important video if you want to take amazing moonshots. Tip number 3. Get the size of the moon you want relative to your subject. This is one of the main mysteries in moon photography. And if you think it has something to do with the focal length, forget about it. The focal length is responsible for how big the moon appears inside the frame, but it has nothing to do with how big the moon will appear compared with your subject. The parameter that solves the puzzle is the shooting distance, and only the shooting distance. How far away you are from your subject. So, the further away you are from your subject, the larger the moon will appear to be compared with your subject. Simple. So let's imagine that you want the apparent size of the moon to have a moon of a size of 10 meters. What's the shooting distance you need to be at to get that apparent size of the moon? Well, the easiest way to get an approximate shooting distance is by applying the PhotoPills rule of 100. We made it. The rule says that if you want the moon to have an apparent diameter, let's say 10 meters, you need to multiply the diameter by 100. So 10 meters by 100 is 1000 meters. If you place your tripod 1000 meters away from your subject, then the moon will have a size of 10 meters compared with your subject. Once you have your initial shooting distance, is when you go to PhotoPills and use the planner to plan your moonshot. Like for example, this moonshot I planned here in Favarich in Menorca. The planner will give you a much more accurate size of the moon, so you can find the right shooting spot to get the size of the moon you want. And actually, you can see the planner in action in this video. Let's check the moon plan we have here. On the top panel, you have the shooting distance, 1.1 kilometers. This is the distance between my lighthouse, the black pin, and my shooting spot, the red pin. And in brackets, you see size 9.7 meters. This is the apparent size of the moon I will get for that specific plan. And also you have the size of the moon on the map. This blue area is actually showing you the 9.7 meters, so you can compare the size of the moon you'll get with your subject. This is super cool. if you want to have this option enabled, just tap on the map settings button next to the plus map button, go to the moon layer, and then make sure that you have show moon size enabled. Also, it's important to know that in many locations, the shooting distance will be given by the limitations of the location, by the possibilities of the location. And this, of course, will limit the size of the moon you can get. Maybe you can go away from your subject, or maybe you like the view of the subject, the composition of with your subject from a certain distance. In this case, you'll need to adapt your moon photo, your composition, to the shooting distance that the location is offering you. Okay, let's say that you've planned this cool moonshot. You have the shooting spot, the rep in position, and then the shooting date and time. This is on February 5th, 2023 at 6 p.m. Now, there is a fundamental parameter you need to check. Tip number 4. Shoot in the right natural light. Depending on the natural light you have at the time of the shooting, you'll be able to capture the whole scene, including the foreground and the moon, correctly exposed in one single exposure. Or you'll be forced to shoot two exposures, one for the moon and one for the foreground. Or to capture, for example, a silhouette. For example, in daylight, golden hour and blue hour, this is when the elevation of the sun is above -6 degrees. This is when you can capture the whole scene correctly exposed, both the moon and the foreground in one single exposure, because there is enough light. And when the elevation of the sun is below -6 degrees, it's when you need to take two exposures to get the whole scene correctly exposed. And this occurs during the nautical twilight, the astronomical twilight, and at night. But of course, this is not true when you're photographing cityscape, because the city lights will allow you to capture correctly exposed both the moon and the buildings in one single exposure. Another thing that natural light affects is the color of the moon. In daylight, the moon is blue and dim. But as the sun goes down and we get into the golden hour, the moon picks up a really nice yellow color. And in blue hour, the moon might even get a really nice purple color. Pretty cool. And after the blue hour, the moon turns yellow again. And as it goes up and up above the horizon, the moon usually gets a kind of whiter yellow color, till it gets its natural gray color. Well, long story short, once you plan your moonshot, only check the natural light you'll get at the time of the shooting. And you'll get the elevation of the sun, the natural light, in panel number 3. For this specific plan, you see that the elevation of the sun is 0.74 degrees. The sun is about to set, and we are shooting in golden hour, so the moon will be pretty powerful. It will have a really beautiful yellow color. And this photo is amazing. The moon in golden hour aligned with the top of the Fabrici lighthouse and with a size more or less of 10 meters. It's super cool. Remember that the golden hour occurs when the elevation of the sun is between 6 and -4 degrees, and that the blue hour occurs when the elevation of the sun is between -4 and -6 degrees. Tip number 5. When focusing, use the hyperfocal distance. In most cases, you want to have both the moon and your subject in focus. And in order to do so, you need to make sure that your subject falls behind the hyperfocal distance. Because this way, you can focus on your subject to get it perfectly sharp, and also get the moon in focus, also get the moon acceptably sharp. Why does this happen? Well, because the hyperfocal distance is the shortest distance you can focus at and still get the stars or the foreground, the infinity, the moon acceptably sharp. Any larger distance you're focusing at, it will keep infinity in focus. Any shorter distance than the hyperfocal, infinity will lose focus, so the moon will be out of focus. So the question is, how can we calculate the hyperfocal distance? Well, you can use PhotoPills to calculate it. On the planner, tap on the map settings button, and now on the map tools, tap on DOF, the depth of field calculator, and go back to the map. And one cool thing about this tool is that you can plan both the depth of field and the field of view. So let's introduce the settings for this shot. I'm using the camera, the Nikon Z6, which is cool. I'm gonna use, let's say, 500 millimeters focal length. Aperture, I'm gonna leave it at 2.8. The shooting distance is gonna be my black pin distance. So I'm focusing at the lighthouse. This is my focus distance. I'm focusing at the lighthouse, so I'm setting the black pin distance here because the black pin is on the lighthouse. Then I'm gonna be shooting in vertical, in portrait mode, and the shooting direction is gonna be aligned with black pin. So I have my subject perfectly aligned. And as you see, this one is so cool because I have the field of view. I have what will be in the photo and outside the photo. And if you have switched on the size of the moon, you also see how big the moon will be relative to your subject and also relative to the frame, to the field of view. In this case, you see that the moon is going to be pretty big, which is great. Going to hyperfocal distance, we have it here, 102 kilometers. We have this 3 icon next to it. This is hyperfocal distance. And because with these settings, with the focal length and the aperture, the hyperfocal distance is 1 kilometer, is shorter than my black pin distance, my subject distance where I'm focusing. So I'm focusing at a larger distance than the hyperfocal, which means that the moon will be also acceptably sharp. I say acceptably sharp because you know that the lens can only perfectly focus on one plane where I am focusing on my subject, so my subject is going to be super sharp. And then we lose focus and sharpness as we move away from the focus plane. But thanks to the depth of field and thanks that our sights are not perfect, we can still see, in this case, the moon acceptably sharp. Tip number 6. This might seem obvious, but avoid vibrations at all costs. Because you'll be using a long lens, a telephoto lens, and maybe even a teleconverter, to center the attention on your subject and the moon. So use a sturdy tripod and head capable of bearing with the weight of the equipment, the camera, the lens. Also, if it's windy, turn on the lens stabilization in your lens. This will help you reduce vibrations due to the wind. And finally, use a shutter release or an intervalometer to release the camera to take the photos. Because the less you touch the camera, the better. Because when you're touching the camera, pressing the shutter release manually, you might introduce vibrations into the system, and vibrations produce blurry images, and of course, you don't want that. You want photos to look as sharp as possible, like this photo here, for example. And tip number 7. Bracket your exposure. In many occasions, you'll be photographing the moon during the golden hour and the blue hour. It's when the light of the scene rapidly changes. It might be difficult to nail the exposure for both the moon and the foreground. And it might be difficult to nail the camera settings to nail the exposure on both the moon and the foreground. So, to get rid of the risk of not getting the exposure right, the solution is to bracket the exposure. Usually a one-stop bracketing of 3 photos will work in most situations. Now, if you wish to learn more on how to photograph the moon, you can do 2 things. The first one is to watch this video where I explain how to photograph the moon step by step. And second, I recommend you to download our super cool and super detailed moon photography guide. It's free. I'm gonna leave a link in the description of this video and in the first comment below. Download it because there you have everything you need to photograph the moon, from inspiration to planning, camera settings, the gear you need, etc. Also, these are just my 7 tips for moon photography. If you have a cool tip to share with the community and with me, please leave a comment below, because I love to learn from your tips too. And as always, if you like this video, give me a like, subscribe, and I'll see you next Wednesday in another video. And remember that you have the power to imagine, plan and shoot legendary photos. Bye!